Before we start, kindly subscribe to my channel and tell me, where in the universe are you watching from? Cashin Voss barely had time to react before the entire bathroom turned into a battlefield. It started with a simple idea, introducing his Jarke wife, Velja, and her sister, Sirakai, to the wonders of an earth shower. In theory, it was supposed to be a relaxing experience. In practice, it was absolute chaos. The moment Cashin turned on the water, Velja's instincts kicked in. With a sharp snarl, she leaped backward, narrowly avoiding the spray. The sudden movement sent bottles of soap flying. One of them hit Sirakai, who reacted as if she'd been attacked. "What is this ambush?" Velja growled, her sharp eyes locked onto the falling water. Cashin held up his hands. "It's just a shower. It's normal on Earth." But his words meant nothing. Sirakai lunged, her combat knife already in her hand. The blade sliced through the air, straight at the stream of water. The force of her swing shattered the showerhead, sending water spraying everywhere. Cashin threw himself against the wall, coughing as cold water drenched him from head to toe. "Okay, bad start. Bad start." Velja moved next, her reflexes honed by years of battle. With one smooth motion, she grabbed Cashin's wrist and pulled him away from the attacking water. Her grip was like iron, her breathing quick, her muscles tense. To her, this wasn't an everyday household appliance. This was a trap. Sirakai, eyes still sharp with suspicion, crouched low, ready for another strike. "Is it poison?" she asked. Cashin groaned. How was this his life? He was supposed to be a diplomat, the first human ambassador to the Jarke matriarchy, a powerful alien society where strength meant everything. He had fought off assassins, debated warlords, and survived deadly political games. But somehow, he was losing a battle to his own shower. "It's not poison," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "It's for cleaning. Humans use it every day." Velja frowned, tilting her head. "You let this water attack you daily?" "Yes, it's refreshing." Sirakai narrowed her eyes. "This is a test of endurance." Cashin opened his mouth, then shut it again. If he said no, they might refuse to ever try it. If he said yes, they might see it as a challenge. Either way, he was trapped. Before he could respond, Velja made her choice. With a determined look, she stepped forward, standing directly under the stream of broken water. The cold liquid poured over her, drenching her instantly. Cashin braced himself for another explosion of rage. Instead, Velja stood still, her expression unreadable. Sirakai watched her sister closely. "Well," Velja took a slow breath. "It is not unpleasant." Cashin let out a sigh of relief. "See, I told you." Sirakai frowned, clearly still suspicious. But after a moment, she hesitantly stepped forward, letting the water hit her arm. She flinched at first, then tilted her head in curiosity. "This is strange," she admitted, "but I do not hate it." Cashin grinned, feeling a small victory. He reached for the bottle of soap, squeezing some into his hands. "Now we use this to wash." Velja took the bottle from him, studying it. Then, without warning, she dumped half of it over her head. Thick foam exploded around her, coating her hair and shoulders. Her eyes widened in alarm. "It attacks in a second wave." Cashin burst out laughing. He couldn't help it. After everything they had been through together, duels, politics, near-death battles, it was this moment, in the middle of a shower, that made him realize how much he loved his ridiculous, warrior-obsessed wife. Velja wiped foam from her face, her expression a mix of irritation and curiosity. "You find this amusing?" Cashin, still grinning, nodded. "Extremely." Sirakai, watching closely, gave a small smirk. Perhaps this human custom is not entirely useless. Velja huffed, but she leaned just slightly into Cashin's touch as he helped clear the soap from her face. Maybe, just maybe, the human way wasn't so bad after all. Cassian Voss had survived many dangerous situations in his life, diplomatic disputes, assassination attempts, and even a duel against a Jar-Kai warlord. But nothing had prepared him for the battle over breakfast. Seated at the long stone table inside their shared quarters on the Jar-Kai capital world, Cassian watched as his warrior wife, Velja, and her equally formidable sister, Sarah-Kai, studied the plate of steaming eggs and toast in front of them like it was an enemy combatant. Velja poked at the food with the tip of her knife. "It does not move." Cassian blinked. "It's not supposed to." Sarah-Kai narrowed her eyes. "It is dead. It was never alive." Velja frowned, exchanging a glance with her sister. Then, in perfect unison, they turned back to Cassian and asked the most serious question of the morning. "Then where is the thrill of the hunt?" Cassian set down his fork and rubbed his temples. He should have seen this coming. Jar-Kai warriors didn't just eat food. They hunted, fought, and conquered it. Their meals were a symbol of strength, victory, and survival. In their eyes, a simple breakfast cooked and placed neatly on a plate was an insult. He sighed. "Not everything has to be a battle, you know." Velja tilted her head, her piercing gaze unwavering. "To a warrior, all things are battle." Cassian resisted the urge to groan. He loved his wife deeply, but her Jar-Kai logic often turned even the most basic human customs into life-or-death challenges. Sarah-Kai leaned forward. "Tell me, human, how did you acquire this food without proving your worth?" Cassian hesitated. "I bought it." Both women stared at him. "You purchased your food." Velja's tone was laced with disbelief. "You traded currency instead of fighting for it." "Yes," Cassian said slowly. "Because in human culture, we—" Sarah-Kai cut him off with a scoff. "Your people must be weak if they cannot even claim their food through combat." Cassian exhaled sharply, trying to keep his patience. "We're not weak," he said firmly. "Humans hunt when necessary, but we also innovate. We build civilizations, grow food, and create systems so people don't have to fight over their next meal." Velja watched him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then suddenly, she reached across the table, stole a piece of toast from his plate, and took a deliberate bite. Cassian stared at her. Sarah-Kai stared at her. The entire room went silent. Slowly, Velja chewed. Her jaw tensed slightly as she swallowed. Then she set the toast down and leaned back in her chair. "It is acceptable." Cassian let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "See, that wasn't so bad, was it?" Velja crossed her arms. "It is unusual, but—" She glanced at the remaining food before giving a small, almost reluctant nod. "I see its purpose." Sarah-Kai still looked skeptical, but after a moment, she reached for a slice of toast as well. She took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, then gave a small, approving grunt. Cassian smirked. "Looks like I won this battle then." Velja's eyes flashed with challenge. In a heartbeat, she moved, closing the space between them. Cassian barely had time to react before she grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled him closer. "In battle, there is no final victory," she murmured, her voice low and teasing. "Only the next fight." Cassian's heart pounded as he met her gaze. There it was, that undeniable spark between them, the fiery mix of passion, challenge, and deep-rooted affection. His smirk widened. "Then I guess I'll just have to keep winning you over." Velja let out a small, amused breath before releasing him. Sarah-Kai, meanwhile, rolled her eyes. "Humans are strange." Cassian chuckled. "You have no idea." As they finished breakfast, he couldn't help but feel like this was just the beginning of many more battles. Some fought with weapons, others with words, and a few with nothing more than a well-timed piece of toast. And honestly, he wouldn't have it any other way. Cassian Voss had long since learned that Jar-Kai traditions made no sense to him. This time, The absurdity involved a duel. It started that morning when Valja's younger sister, Sarakai, casually announced that Cashin was unfit to be a Jarkay mate. The moment the words left her mouth, the entire hall fell silent. Valja, seated beside Cashin, narrowed her eyes. "Explain." Sarakai crossed her arms. "He is intelligent, yes, clever, perhaps, but has he truly proven himself? Has he fought and bled for you? How can a human, one who does not battle for his meals, be worthy of a warrior like you?" Cashin sighed, running a hand down his face. "You do realize I've survived assassination attempts, outmaneuvered warlords, and literally fought for my life multiple times." Sarakai shrugged. "Yet you have not faced me." Cashin's brain froze. "Wait, what?" Valja sat up, her expression unreadable. "You challenge my mate." Sarakai nodded. "A proper test. If he wins, I will never question his worth again." Cashin looked between the two sisters. He could already tell there was no way out of this. So of course, 30 minutes later, he was standing in the middle of a combat arena, completely regretting every decision that led him here. The courtyard was packed with Jarkay warriors, all eager to see a human get destroyed. They lined the circular arena, murmuring among themselves. Some laughed. Others made bets. Cashin ignored them and focused on the real problem. Sarakai, standing across from him, holding two curved daggers. She rolled her shoulders. "You may use a weapon." Cashin did not have a weapon. "I think I'll pass." Sarakai raised a brow. "Brave or foolish?" "Probably both." A deep voice echoed through the courtyard. "Begin." Sarakai moved like a striking viper. Before Cashin could blink, she was already upon him. Cashin dodged to the side, barely avoiding a slice across his ribs. He backpedaled, calculating. Sarakai was fast, but she was a warrior through and through, trained to fight with strength and precision. Cashin, on the other hand, he was trained to fight dirty. She lunged again. This time, he ducked under her arm and yanked the fabric of her belt. It was a simple trick, one that sent her spinning off balance. The watching warriors gasped as Sarakai stumbled, clearly not expecting such a tactic. Cashin smirked. "I don't need to win. I just need you to lose balance." Sarakai's gaze sharpened. "Interesting." She attacked again, faster, more calculated. Cashin dodged, rolled, used the terrain to his advantage. He didn't try to overpower her. Instead, he redirected her attacks, outmaneuvering her, frustrating her. The crowd murmured. This was not the brutal clash they expected. This was strategy. Then, just as Cashin predicted, Sarakai overcommitted to a strike. In one swift motion, he sidestepped and grabbed her wrist. Using her own momentum against her, he flipped her over his shoulder, slamming her onto the ground. Silence. Sarakai lay there, blinking up at the sky. Then, to Cashin's surprise, she laughed. A deep, satisfied laugh. She sat up, rubbing the back of her head. "I see now." Cashin, still panting, raised a brow. "See what?" Sarakai grinned. "Why my sister chose you." The watching warriors exchanged looks. Some nodded in understanding. Others murmured in approval. Cashin hadn't won through brute strength. He had won through adaptability. Valja stepped forward, her gaze full of pride. "It seems my mate has bested you, sister." Sarakai sighed but nodded. "He is worthy." Then she smirked. "For now." Cashin groaned. "There's going to be another test, isn't there?" Valja smirked back. "Always." Cashin sighed. He really needed a vacation. Cashin Voss had barely recovered from his duel with Sarakai before finding himself in an even bigger mess. This time, it involved a Jarkay High Warlord, an insult Cashin didn't even realize he made, and a room full of warriors who now expected him to fight to the death. The trouble started at a formal gathering where Cashin, ever the diplomat, had been negotiating peace terms between the Jarkay and a rival species. He had chosen his words carefully, speaking with respect and precision. But apparently, when discussing the Jarkai's territorial strength, he had unknowingly used a phrase that, in their language, sounded far too close to questioning the honor of the High Warlord himself. And now the towering warlord stood before him, arms crossed, expression like carved stone, demanding a duel to restore his pride. Cassian sighed. Why does everything in this culture require a fight? Velja, standing beside him, smirked. Because battle proves strength. Sirakai leaned in. You may run. It would be amusing. Cassian shot her a look. Not helping. The gathered warriors waited, some murmuring, others eager to see the human humiliated. Cassian rubbed the bridge of his nose. He was not an idiot. Unlike his fight with Sirakai, where he had relied on speed and strategy, this warlord was built like a mountain. There was no way Cassian could win through combat alone. So instead, he would fight like a diplomat. Cassian stepped forward and raised a hand. Very well, I accept your challenge. The warlord grunted in approval. Good. You may choose weapons. Cassian smiled. I choose words. A ripple of confusion spread through the room. The warlord frowned. Words? Cassian nodded. A warrior's honor is everything, yes. The warlord crossed his arms. It is. Then what greater test of honor than a battle of wit? If I cannot best you with my words, then my insult was unworthy, and I will accept whatever punishment you choose. Cassian spread his hands. But if I can outmaneuver you in debate, then I have proven my worth. That, too, is strength. The warlord studied him, his sharp gaze unreadable. Around them, murmurs of intrigue spread. Finally, after a long silence, the warlord laughed. A bold move, human, and a wise one. He stepped forward, eyes gleaming with challenge. Then speak, and let us see if your tongue is as sharp as a blade. Cassian exhaled. Time to work his magic. For the next half hour, the arena became a battlefield of words. Cassian argued with precision, weaving logic, respect, and subtle challenges into his speech. The warlord, to his credit, was no fool. He countered with pride and tradition, trying to trap Cassian into contradicting himself. But Cassian had spent years handling intergalactic negotiations, and he was very, very good at this game. As the debate raged on, the warriors in the room listened intently, expressions shifting from amusement to genuine admiration. Then, finally, Cassian delivered his final blow. With all respect, warlord, if I were truly unworthy of speaking in this hall, would I still be standing before you now? Silence. The warlord exhaled slowly, then grinned. You are dangerous, human. He let out a booming laugh. I like that. Cassian relaxed slightly as the tension in the room dissolved. The warlord clapped a heavy hand on his shoulder. You have bested me in words, as you bested Sirakai in battle. It seems Velja has chosen her mate well. Cassian turned to Velja. You're keeping track of my wins, right? Velja smirked. Oh, do not worry. I will ensure you never forget them. Cassian wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. But one thing was certain. He was finally starting to understand this ridiculous, battle-hungry culture. And maybe he was starting to love it. Cassian Voss had survived warrior duels, political debates, and even assassination attempts. But nothing could have prepared him for this. It started when Velja and Sarah Kay decided to experience their first human shower. Cassian had tried to explain the concept to them, but as usual, Jarkai warriors had their own way of doing things. So when he walked into their quarters, he found chaos. Steam filled the air, water pooled on the floor, and an alarming amount of soap bubbles clung to nearly every surface. The sound of arguing echoed from behind the shower door. Why does the water attack me? Sarah Kay's voice rang out. You must master it, sister. Conquer the stream. Velja commanded. Cassian groaned. Of course, they turned a simple shower into a battle. He knocked on the door. Everything okay in there? The response was instant. Human. Explain this. Velja's voice was sharp, as if she were preparing for battle. Cashin hesitated. Explain what? The cleansing foam. Sarah, Kay demanded. It expands. It will not leave. Cashin pinched the bridge of his nose. Oh no. He stepped inside and immediately slipped on the soaked floor. He barely caught himself on the counter. The place looked like a storm had hit it. The shower still ran at full blast, steam swirling in the air, while soap bubbles covered half the room. Velja and Sarah stood in the shower, looking far too serious for people covered in soap. Cashin stared. How did this happen? Velja pointed at the shampoo bottle. You said to use this. Yes. Sarah pointed at the empty bottle. So we did. Cashin's eyes widened. You used the whole bottle. It was not enough at first, Velja said, arms crossed. So we used more. Cashin groaned. You're supposed to use a small amount. It expands with water. Sarah narrowed her eyes. Then why was this not written on the bottle? It is written on the bottle. Cashin pointed at the label. Right there. Velja studied the small text. Then, slowly, she turned to Sarah. We have dishonored ourselves. Sarah nodded gravely. This is a lesson. Cashin couldn't believe what he was hearing. They acted like they had lost a battle against the shampoo. You're overthinking this, he muttered, stepping forward. Here, just rinse it out. He reached past them and adjusted the shower settings. The water instantly softened into a gentler stream, washing away the excess foam. Both warrior women stared in awe. You have tamed the storm, Velja whispered. Sarah nodded. The water obeys you. Cashin sighed. It's just a shower. Velja turned to him, crossing her arms. You should have told us this before. I did. Sarah smirked. Then clearly, you failed as a teacher. Cashin rubbed his temples. I need a drink. Velja stepped forward, placing a hand on his chest. Perhaps you deserve a reward. Cashin raised an eyebrow. For surviving this. Velja smirked. For taming the storm. Sarah huffed. You two are impossible. Cashin chuckled. Welcome to human culture. As the last of the foam finally washed away, Cashin realized something important. If these warrior women could conquer space battles, duels, and diplomacy, then nothing, not even an unruly human shower, could stop them. Cashin Voss had been walking on thin ice ever since arriving in Jarkay territory. Surviving duels, debates, and disastrous showers was one thing, but now he was dealing with something far more dangerous. Jealousy. And not just any jealousy. Jarkay warrior jealousy. It all started during a formal gathering. One of those diplomatic events Cashin had learned to endure. He was there to represent humanity, shake hands, make allies, and most importantly, not cause an intergalactic incident. But apparently, no one told the other delegates that Cashin was already claimed. He had been casually conversing with an ambassador from the Talaric Dominion when he felt it. A presence, a sharp, unblinking predatory gaze. Cashin tensed. He turned his head slightly, and there she was, Velja, standing at a distance, arms crossed, expression cool but unreadable. To anyone else, she might have looked calm. But Cashin knew better. Velja was seething. The Talaric ambassador, completely unaware of the imminent danger, laughed at something Cashin said and placed a hand on his arm. A light touch, completely innocent, but apparently not innocent enough. Cashin barely had time to react before Velja was at his side. Ambassador. Her voice was smooth as steel. The Talaric diplomat blinked, clearly sensing the shift in atmosphere. Ah, Lady Velja. I was just discussing. Velja stepped between them, effectively blocking Cashin from view. My mate does not require further discussion. Cashin winced. Oh no. The ambassador hesitated. I see. You do now. Valje smiled, but there was zero warmth in it. Cashin sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Valje. She turned to him, eyes narrowed. You are too welcoming, Cashin. I was being diplomatic. You were being touched. Cashin groaned. It was a friendly gesture. Sirakai, who had been watching with clear amusement, stepped in. Sister, if you are upset, simply challenge the ambassador to combat. Cashin's eyes widened. Whoa, bad idea. Valje tilted her head. Perhaps. Cashin grabbed her hands before this turned into an actual duel. Listen to me. You don't need to fight everyone who talks to me. Valje studied him, her gaze unreadable. Then, after a long pause, she sighed. Very well. Cashin relaxed. Then she pulled him closer. Close enough for everyone, including the ambassador, to see exactly who he belonged to. Cashin barely had time to react before Valje leaned in, brushing her lips against his in a slow, possessive kiss. It was not subtle. The entire hall fell silent. Sirakai smirked. A much better display of dominance. Cashin pulled back, feeling very, very warm. You just did that in front of everyone. Valje smirked. Now there will be no further misunderstandings. Cashin exhaled slowly. Well, that was one way to settle things. He glanced at the Talaric ambassador, who looked somewhere between stunned and terrified. Diplomacy, Cashin muttered, shaking his head. You're all ridiculous. Valje placed a hand on his chest. And yet, you are ours. Cashin sighed. He was never going to win, was he? Cashin Voss had handled angry warlords, jealous warriors, and disastrous cultural misunderstandings. But what he faced now? This was new. He stood in the center of the Jarkai Great Hall, surrounded by hundreds of warriors, all watching him with sharp, expectant gazes. The air was thick with tension, the flames of the ceremonial braziers casting long shadows across the ancient stone floor. Valje stood in front of him, her expression serious but unreadable. Sirakai stood nearby, arms crossed, watching with quiet amusement. Cashin exhaled. Okay, he could handle this. Probably. The problem. He was about to take the Jarkai warrior's oath. Not because he wanted to, not because he had asked for it, but because the High Warlord had declared it necessary. Apparently, after surviving duels, debates, and proving himself worthy in battle and diplomacy, the Jarkai had decided that Cashin was no longer just an outsider. He was one of them. And if he was one of them, then he had to take the oath. Cashin sighed. He really needed to stop impressing these people. The High Warlord stepped forward, his deep voice echoing through the hall. Cashin Voss, you stand before the Jarkai as more than a guest. You have fought alongside us. You have earned respect. You have claimed a mate among us. A ripple of murmurs spread through the warriors. Valje remained stone-faced, but Cashin could see the flicker of pride in her eyes. The warlord continued. To be Jarkai is to live with honor, to protect what is yours, to fight when words fail, and to stand unshaken in the face of all enemies. Cashin swallowed. No pressure, right? The warlord raised a ceremonial dagger. Do you accept this oath? Cashin hesitated. Did he really belong here? He had spent his whole life as a diplomat, traveling from world to world, never truly fitting in anywhere. He was human, surrounded by warriors from a culture built on combat and strength. And yet, he looked at Valje, at Sirakai, at the warriors who had once seen him as weak, but now watched him with respect. Cashin took a breath. Then he stepped forward. I accept. The warriors stamped their weapons on the ground, a low, thunderous acknowledgement. The High Warlord extended the dagger. Then take the blade and swear upon it. Cashin took the dagger carefully. The metal was warm, heavy. The words of the oath had been given to him beforehand. He knew what to say, but instead of simply reciting them, he met the warlord's gaze and spoke from his heart. I swear to stand with those who stand with me, to protect what is mine, to defend those who cannot fight, and to use both words and strength to keep peace. His voice was steady. I will not break faith. I will not abandon those I claim as my own. Another heavy silence. Then Velja stepped forward. She placed her hand over his on the dagger. Her grip was warm, steady. You are mine, she said softly, but with absolute certainty. Cashin's breath caught. She wasn't asking. She was declaring. A slow smile spread across his lips. Then I guess I'm staying. The warriors roared in approval. Sirakai smirked. You do realize you've just promised to fight every battle with us now, right? Cashin sighed. Of course he had. But when Velja leaned in, her voice warm in his ear, saying, You will not regret it. Cashin decided. Maybe he wouldn't. Cashin Voss had never expected to find himself standing on the battlefield with the Jarkai, leading warriors into battle as one of their own. Yet here he was. The enemy forces stretched across the horizon, their dark ships looming overhead. The sky crackled with energy, the air thick with tension. The Jarkai warriors stood beside him, weapons in hand, ready for war. Cashin took a slow breath. This was it. Velja stepped to his side, her presence calm, commanding. You do not need to fight. The warriors will follow my lead. Cashin smirked. Didn't I take an oath? I believe it said something about standing with those who stand with me. Sirakai, standing on his other side, chuckled. If he tries to run, I will stop him. Cashin rolled his eyes. Not running. Velja studied him for a moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. The battle will be brutal, she warned. Cashin flexed his fingers. Then let's make sure we win. With a single motion, Velja raised her blade to the sky. The warriors behind her roared, their voices shaking the ground. And then, the battle began. It was chaos. Cashin fought like he always did, not with brute force, but with strategy, precision, and a whole lot of luck. He dodged, countered, and outmaneuvered enemies twice his size. When he couldn't fight, he outsmarted. Velja and Sirakai fought like unstoppable forces, cutting through the enemy ranks like they were born for this. Cashin wasn't sure how long the battle lasted, but by the time the final enemy fell, he stood shoulder to shoulder with the warriors who once doubted him. And this time, they cheered for him. That night, back in the Jarkai stronghold, Cashin sat by the fire, exhaustion finally settling in. The air was filled with laughter, with victory songs, with the warmth of shared triumph. Velja sat beside him, quiet but content. You did well today, she finally said. Cashin smirked. Coming from you, that's basically poetry. She turned to him, her gaze sharp. You are no longer an outsider. Cashin felt something tighten in his chest. He knew that already, but hearing her say it, that made it real. Sirakai dropped into the seat across from them, grinning. So, Cashin, what now? Will you return to your people, tell them how you survived among warriors? Cashin exhaled, glancing around the fire, at the warriors, at his warriors. Then he looked at Velja. She met his gaze, waiting. Cashin smiled. His choice was already made. I think I'll stay. Velja didn't say anything. She simply reached for his hand, squeezing it gently but firmly. Sirakai grinned. Welcome home, then. Cashin squeezed Velja's hand back. Yeah, this was home.